Thank you, Joyce. Just recently I had described how pleasant it is, and some of you could share in this sentiment that you're, like in our case, it's like typically after the littles have gone to bed, you're sitting on the couch, or I am, and whether I'm watching something on TV or not, it might be on, and you just get so still and so comfortable, and you just kind of drift off, and you're asleep on the couch. Maybe it is that somebody wakes you up, or your spouse, and says, hey, you ought to get up and go to bed. Or sometimes it is that you even just wake yourself up and you think, I ought to go to bed. And you realize the best thing for you to do is to get up and go to bed, because you really don't want to sleep on the couch all night. But there's this reluctance to get up, and there's this reluctance to get up for two reasons. One is because of the comfort that you're experiencing in the moment, but the other reason is this. You're aware of the fact that you don't just simply get up and go to bed. I don't know how much thought you've given to this, but every one of us has some sort of routine that is part of our experience just to go to bed. All right, so you get up, and you don't just go get in the bed. Odds are you need to change clothes. You've got some sort of sleeping uniform that you have, and that differs from person to person, so you figure out what that's going to be, and so you're going to change clothes. You're going to go into the bathroom, and you're going to do something with your teeth, right? You take them out, you brush them, you do something with them, but you're going to do something, hopefully, with your teeth. Ladies, those of you that wear makeup, if you haven't already at that point, you're probably going to get a wire brush out or something, and you're going to start scraping. But you're going to try to get makeup off your face. Or maybe you just wash your face at night. If you're a teenager, you're going to get like a quart of Oxy-10, and you're going to start coating your face before you go to bed. If you wear contacts, you're going to take your contacts out, and you're going to put them in a container, in a solution. Besides that, many of you, you want to sleep cooler, so you maybe lower the thermostat, or maybe it is that you turn the wind tunnel on in your bedroom because you want 11 fans pointing at you at all times. In addition to that, you want to make sure that the boogeyman can't get in, so you want to make sure that the doors are locked. You probably don't want to leave all the lights on in the house all night, so you're going to turn the lights off. If you have an alarm, you'll probably set an alarm, and if you don't have a security alarm, you're probably going to set some sort of alarm so that you don't sleep too late the next morning. It's kind of exhausting. I mean, honestly, that's the reason that we go to sleep when we get to bed, because of all the stuff we had to do to get ready for bed. But nothing about anything I just described is a surprise to you, because every one of us has a routine that we undertake. There's preparation that we undertake before we go to bed because of this fact. We don't just do anything. I mean, virtually everything that we do, there is some sort of preparation for it. And so for going to work in the morning, you don't just wake up and then get to work. There's a whole stack of things that you wind up doing. School for some is starting this week, and for others the next week. There's all kinds of things that you do to prepare to go to school. If you're going to play a baseball game, a volleyball game, whatever it is, you're going to prepare to do that. You don't go to the store. You're going to probably brush your hair, and you're going to get your shoes. There's all these things that you prepare. In fact, you didn't just show up here today. You prepared to come here. Everything in life, it seems, we prepare to do, except sometimes as followers of Christ, this is the mentality that many times we can operate with. We realize that it is the plan and the purpose of God to use the people, to use those that are in relationship with Him, in relationship to Him. But what we can do is to say, okie dokie, God, here I am. Do something with me. Right here, right now, some way, somehow, here I am, just do something with me. But isn't it interesting? We want to prepare for everything else. You prepared to come here this morning. You'll prepare to go to work tomorrow. You'll prepare to go to bed. You'll prepare to have lunch. You'll prepare for everything, except when it comes to the God of the universe using you. Many times we fall into a trap where we think, I don't need to do anything. I just say, here I am. Let's do something great. In truth, if you want God to be using you, The reality is, I think there's some things that we need to do to prepare ourselves so that we're in a point and place where He can actually do something with us. That's what we're thinking about today as part of a series we started last week. We're looking at the life of Daniel in a series called Life in Babylon. And Daniel is not, and his Jewish countrymen and his friends that are with him, they're not from Babylon. Babylon is a foreign country, a pagan country, and they have been carted off from Jerusalem, and they find themselves as followers of God in a culture that's headed this way, but they're trying to follow a God who's leading them this way. Likely that should sound familiar to you because that's exactly how our culture is operating. We're operating in a world and a culture that's not headed closer to God but away from Him. And if you're serious about following Christ, it's going to lead you to operate in countercultural ways. So how do we do that? As part of that, we want to think this morning about a very simple but important question. What should I do to be prepared for God to use me? In a culture that's headed in the opposite direction, if I want God to actually do something and cause my life to matter, to count, and to be of consequence in His service, what should I do to prepare for Him to use me? Look with me in your Bibles today to Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2, we're going to start in verse 17. We're going to be picking up midstream, but I promise we'll get to the context here in just a moment. There we're told that Daniel went to his house and told his friends, you see their Hebrew names, but this is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Verse 18, urging them to ask the God of the heavens for mercy concerning this mystery, so Daniel and his friends would not be destroyed with the rest of Babylon's wise men. The mystery was then revealed to Daniel in a vision at night, and Daniel praised the God of heavens and declared, may the name of God be praised forever and ever, for wisdom and power belong to Him. He changes the times and seasons. He removes kings and establishes kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals the deep and hidden things. He knows what's in the darkness, and light dwells in Him. I offer thanks and praise to you, God of my fathers, because you have given me wisdom and power, and now you have let me know what we have asked of you, for you have let us know the king's mystery. Therefore Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had assigned to destroy the wise men of Babylon. And he came and he said to him, don't destroy the wise men of Babylon. Bring me before the king, and I will give him the interpretation. Then Arioch quickly brought Daniel before the king and said to him, I have found a man among the Judean exiles who can let the king know the interpretation. The king said in reply to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to tell me the dream I had and its interpretation? And Daniel said to the king, no wise man, medium, magician, or diviner is able to make known to the king the mystery he asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and He has let King Nebuchadnezzar know what will happen in the last days. All right, so what's going on here? I believe what's going on here is that we're getting an example that shows to us the answer to our question, which again is this: what should I do to prepare for God to use me? Based on Daniel's example, I believe the first thing that we need to do is this: understand that personal devotion must precede public demonstration. Understand that personal devotion must precede public demonstration. When last we left Daniel, he and so many other young Hebrew men have been carted off to Babylon, and they are being trained, they are being prepared, they are being equipped to be able to serve the king of Babylon, whose name is Nebuchadnezzar. And so you have all these young, smart, becoming well-educated and cultured men that are getting steeped in Babylonian culture, tradition, and literature, and language, and all of those things. And you remember last week we saw how Daniel felt convicted about this whole notion of eating the food that was prepared for them, that was the same food that was given to the king. We don't know exactly why, but it seems that God was saying, there's something wrong with this. Perhaps it's dedication or consecration to an idol, maybe because it was unclean. We don't know. But Daniel believed God didn't want him to partake in this. And we saw what happened last week as he asked as he asked the king for permission, asked for a way not to have to defile himself in this way. By the time you get to the end of chapter 1, what you see is that God is beginning, even in a culture that's headed in the opposite direction, even though Daniel is not at home, even though Daniel is not where he wants to be, even though Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are not in familiar territory, you see that God is beginning to bless them, and he is giving them these abilities, among other things, Daniel, to be able to interpret dreams and visions. That's going to matter because of what happens in chapter 2. As you get to the beginning of chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar goes to bed at night, and he wakes up in the morning having had a dream. Maybe he wakes up in the middle of the night having had a dream. Now, every one of us dreams every night. Sometimes we remember, sometimes we don't. I don't know about you, but many times I'll have a dream, and I'm wondering, how did my mind put that together? You're like, oh man, it was just crazy what happened in there. And we all have dreams, but sometimes we have dreams where you think, I wonder if there's more to that. Has that ever happened to you? It's probably happened to all of us, especially, and I've never had this, where I've had a recurring dream, where the same thing keeps happening over and over. In Nebuchadnezzar's case, that's what happened. He has this recurring dream that keeps occurring, and he begins to believe sincerely there is something to this. There is meaning behind this. This is not just the madness of my mind kind of unpacking from a crazy day. There's something to this. And so what he does is that he gets together the wise men of Babylon. And so while Nebuchadnezzar is not a follower of God, he is a man who thinks a whole lot about spiritual things. Unfortunately, the spiritual things that he's thinking are in a dark spiritual realm. And so there's a whole lot of dark spiritual activity that he has, these sorcerers and these mediums and that he regularly would be consulting. And so he gets all these wise men together of Babylon, and he says this, I have been having a dream, and I need you to tell me what it means. And if you tell me what it means, you'll be blessed. You're going to be loaded. It's going to be like you win the lottery. You're going to get position and prominence and wealth and all those things. Oh, and by the way, if you can't tell me, I'll kill you, and then we'll make your house a garbage dump. So those are your choices. And so the wise men say, okay, all right, you tell us what the dream was, and we'll tell you what it meant. That's kind of reasonable. You tell us what the dream was, then we tell you what it meant. And the king says, no, I'm not going to do that. Because how do I know that you really know what the dream means? So here's the deal. Not only must you tell me what the dream means, you have to tell me what the dream was, and I'm not telling you. So I had a dream, you tell me what the dream was, and you tell me what the dream meant, and we'll be okay. In fact, if you can do that, it's going to be really good for you. And so they say to the king, listen, you are asking the impossible. I mean, no one, none of us has any ability to do that, and this infuriates the king. So that he gives the order, and its context seems to suggest that he sets a date where all the wise men, all those that are in this category, in this designation in Babylonian culture, are going to be carted up, taken into custody, and all executed. Get rid of you all. And this was going to include people like Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So that the king is irate, he issues the order, and Arioch goes around, and among the things that is happening is that word is spreading. And Daniel hears about this, and so he says to Arioch, it seems that he's got a good relationship with him, and he says, hey, what's the big deal? I mean, like, why is the king, I'm hearing some rumbling, what's going on? So Arioch explains what has been going on, and so Daniel asks that the king press the pause button. Can we just stop for a moment? Give me enough time, and I'll come back and I'll tell you what the dream was and what the dream meant. All right, so at that point, that takes you to verse 16. It says, so Daniel went and asked the king to give him some time so that he could give the king the interpretation. And what happens in verse 17? Then Daniel went to his house, and he tells Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego about the matter. He urges them to ask, and they're to join him in asking the God of the heavens for mercy concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his friends would not be destroyed with the rest of Babylon's wise men. And the mystery was then revealed to Daniel in a vision at night. This is very simple, yet it is altogether important. If you want God to use you to work in your life, to do something of consequence with you, it takes more than just saying, Okie dokie, God, here I am. Let's get on with it. Here I am. Let's do something. It requires some preparation. And what it requires is some expression of and practice of personal devotion before God ever uses you in a public way. Understand, before Daniel ever goes to say, hey, this is what is going on, before God is able to actually meaningfully use Daniel in public, what is he doing? Daniel is spending time with God privately. There is, and we've got to understand, there is not just a link, there is an inextricable link between my personal and your personal devotion and your personal commitment to God. There's a direct linkage between that and the extent to which God can and is able to use you. After all, it is not out in public, but it is in the private place. It is when it's just you and God, and you having your personal time with Him, and you being committed and walking with Him, not while everybody else is looking, not just on Sunday mornings, but on a Tuesday afternoon walking the hall at school, and on a Wednesday morning in the break room at work, and on a Friday night when you've got people that are asking you to do things that compromise what God has given you as an instruction. It's in those moments, though, away from the public eye, your commitment to God, your personal expressions of devotion to Him, your quiet time with Him, that's going to prepare you before God can use you publicly. Personal devotion must precede public demonstration. It is interesting how we operate, and I don't know if every culture is like this, but certainly it seems as Americans, or maybe it is just in the South, how it is that we operate with those who are from other countries that are not native English speakers. And so we operate so many times with a couple of strange notions or a couple of strange practices. First of all, we operate under this notion. If we're talking to someone who doesn't understand English or doesn't understand English well, we assume that the reason is because they are deaf. So if I will just talk slowly and loudly, you will comprende. I don't know if other people in other countries do that with us as we travel abroad, but so many times that's what we do. We operate with the notion, if we just talk loud and slow, then they'll get it. All right? We operate that way. And there's something else that we do that's kind of strange. Let's say you're encountering someone that is from a foreign country. Maybe they have moved here, maybe they lived here, or they visit here, whatever it is, and you're having conversation with them. And so English is not their native tongue. They're native Spanish, French, German, Portuguese, whatever, Chinese speaker, whatever it is. And so you're asking them about where they're from, and you're finding out about their culture, and you're asking questions about their language. And then what do? Tell me something in your language. Why do we do that? We're like, here, perform. Let me throw you the dollar. But most of us have done something like this. Someone who is not a native English speaker, or whatever language that is, especially if we're not too familiar with it, will say something to me, or give me a sentence or two in your native language. And invariably, what do they say? Well, what do you want me to say? What do you want me to say? So many times, I believe it is that we take that same type of mentality, we carry that same type of practice over to spiritual experiences in our walk with the Lord. You say, well, I don't quite get it. Let me put the pieces together for you. You get the fact, hopefully, that if you have a relationship with God, He really does want to use you. He wants to use your life in kingdom consequential ways. He wants to use you as someone who is living among people in a culture that are headed far from Him, to use you to impact them so that you can point them into His direction so that they might come to know Him as well. But maybe you go to a Bible study, to a worship service, to a workshop, to a conference, and you're reminded of that fact. You say, you know what I've been doing, I've been kind of sitting on the bench, I've been riding the sidelines, and I really need to get on the field, and so I just need to do something. Just say something. Almost is what we're saying. Just say something. Just anything. Well, what do you want me to say? I don't know. Just do something. And so many times I believe we can get frantic in that. We may rightfully feel conviction that we haven't been active in serving, and so we say, okay, let me just find something to do. I better do something because I've been sitting out too long. I need to get on the field. I need to be doing something. I need to be in the game and just do something. But God doesn't want me to do that. What He wants to do first is for me to get alone with Him, for me to be in regular, personal, private conversation with Him so that I know that what He even wants me to do, the way in which that He's guiding me, the path that He wants me to take, the road that He wants me to go down. Because of this fact, personal devotion, it must precede public demonstrations. Listen, today's encouragement for you is not to just do something. The encouragement is for you to be prepared to get ready for God to do something in and through you. And before that ever happens publicly, before anybody else is ever able to see it, it's going to start with you and God when the lights aren't shining on you. When you're away from everyone else, it's through your own personal devotion that must precede these public demonstrations. There's another thing that we need to do to prepare, and that's this. Prefer God's glory over personal advancement. We need to decide out of the gate, I am preferring God's glory over my own personal advancement. All right, so the clock has been ticking. Daniel has asked for the pause button to be pressed so he can find out what the answer is. And so he, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they pray, and God responds, and He communicates to Daniel in this a dream of his own exactly what Nebuchadnezzar's dream, what his vision was, and communicates to him what it actually means. So now Daniel has the answer. And he, at this point, goes in verse 24 to Arioch, and he says this, first of all, don't destroy the wise men of Babylon. He says, bring me before the king, and I'll give the interpretation. So he's saying, don't kill all these guys. Give me a chance to go see the king. And so he does. And in verse 26, the king says to Daniel, are you able to tell me the dream I had and its interpretation? Pay attention to Daniel's response. He says, no wise man, medium, magician, or diviner is able to make known the king's mystery he asked about. That's not a great way to start the sentence. He's essentially saying, what you've asked is humanly impossible. But notice how verse 28 begins. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. I can't do it. None of them can do it. But I know the one who can. What I want you to see is what Daniel is passing up in this. He's passing up two things. First of all, he is passing up an opportunity to get rid of some enemies. Because what was the first thing that he said? He said to Arioch, don't kill these guys. Do not proceed with the execution. And he very well could have just kept his mouth shut, let a whole slew of them get killed, so that then Daniel is just one big fish in a very small pond, and that would help elevate his stature and position within the kingdom. But he chooses not to do that. He doesn't seek to use this opportunity as an occasion for his own personal advancement against other people. But the other thing is this. The king says, are you able to do this? And very easily Daniel could have said, you betcha I can do this. I've got this. This is just a layup. I've got this. And in doing so, heaped on himself or invited on himself all kinds of praise and attention and accolades so that the king and everybody would be like, oh, bravo, wonderful, Daniel, you are so great. But what does Daniel do? He deflects. He says, I can't, none of these others can, none of us can do this, but I know God, the maker of heaven and earth, and He is the one before whom there is no mystery. And He has made known this to me. So what is he doing? He's taking attention that he could have gotten, and he's deflecting it because Daniel did this. Daniel preferred God's glory over his personal advancement. Now, you've heard me say over and over and over again and give to you what Michael's definition is of God's glory. And I like it. That's why I keep repeating it. But I think it makes sense. When we talk about the glory of God, or we talk about glorifying God, this is how I describe it. Any and everything that we do to communicate that God is greater than anyone and everything. So if you come to discover the glory of God, you're discovering that He is greater than anyone and everything. If you are seeking to glorify God, you are trying to communicate that He is greater than anyone and everything. And here's the truth. Daniel, as a guy that God was able to use significantly, decided, I would rather have other people know how great God is rather than how great Daniel is. I would rather people have their attention focused on Him and seeing what God can do than by thinking about what Daniel is able to accomplish. And you know what? That type of mentality and that type of choice is one that God always blesses and always rewards, because the maker of heaven and earth is not interested in making your name great. He's just not. God's not interested in more people knowing about you and how wonderful you are. What God's interested in is using you to demonstrate who He is and how great He is. And if you want to be a man or woman, a teenager, whoever it is, that has a relationship with God where He is able to use you, you've got to decide, I choose, and I would rather have God use me in ways maybe that other people may never even notice, so that they might discover His greatness as opposed to mine. When I was a kid, I remember, I don't know exactly how old I was, I'm going to say 7 or 8 or so. We were, I don't know if my parents were at home at this point, but I do remember it was me and my sister, and we were in our living room. And this house was built on a slab, so you just had carpet sitting on top of concrete in there. And I had one of those yellow wiffle ball bats, you know, those little skinny ones, but they're not real hard, but they're pretty firm. Anyway, Christy is laying on the floor, and I'm sitting in a chair on the couch or something. And I'm just kind of taking this, and I'm hitting the floor with it, and of course it's striking that concrete underneath, and so it's, you know, bouncing back. And I keep getting closer to her. And she's determined to not flinch with me doing this. And I'm hitting this floor fairly hard. And I keep getting closer, and I keep getting closer, and I keep getting closer until I smacked her in the forehead. She starts to cry, and I don't know if I cried or not, but I was scared because I really thought I had done something to really hurt her. I didn't know what the damage. Now, come to think of it, that might explain. Anyway. And rightfully so, she pledges that she's going to tell on me. But let me ask you this. Why did I hit her in the head? I mean, the truth is this. I didn't mean to hit her in the head. I really didn't. But here's the thing. We tend to strike at or near what we're aiming at, don't we? It's simple logic. We tend to hit or strike at or near what we were aiming to. And I was trying to get close to her head, and I did. Sure enough, I hit her in the head. The Wyndham Championship was just this past weekend here in Greensboro. Why do you think those golfers hit that ball? Because that's what they were aiming at. You watch a baseball game this afternoon, why might a batter hit the ball? Because that's what they're aiming at. Consistently, it is the case that we hit at or near what we're aiming at. This is what I want to tell you. You can have God's glory, or you can have your personal advancement. You can make God's name great, or you can have your name great. You can have either one of them. I promise you, you can have it. It just depends on which one you're aiming at. What I want you to know is that Daniel is a guy that was not aiming at his name being great. He was interested and he was aiming at God's name being great. And because of that, we're still talking about Daniel today. We're still looking at how God used him and has continued to use him literally now for thousands of years. Why? Because he preferred God's glory over his personal advancement. You can have your name in lights. You can have people thinking you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. You can have everybody thinking that you are wonderful. You can have that. Or you can have people thinking that the God who made heaven and earth truly is great and that he makes an eternal difference in the lives of people. You can have that. But you can't have them both. Because you're aiming at one or the other. My encouragement for you is evaluate what you're aiming at today and ask yourself this question: do I want to be someone that God is using? Maybe then it's time to start getting ready. Will you bow your heads with me?